talking about what an expectant was. Can you tell us that experience? That was early on, right?
I think, yeah, and these are the things that you don't really know during the first mass casualty situation, when you have a lot of patients coming in. Patients come in right from the field. And so patients who were loaded onto, or soldiers who were loaded onto the helicopters from the field really weren't triaged. They were injured, they were given first aid, they put on the helicopter, they land at the hospital, and they come into the triage area. And the expectant patients, every patient had a little tag on them. And the expectant patients were patients whose injuries were so severe that although they were still alive, no one thought they would survive. And they really weren't going to treat, they didn't treat them, they didn't operate on them. They just basically would send them into the ICU, and we would try to keep them comfortable until they died.
Did any of them survive that were expectant? Did any of them actually survive even though they were thought to be dying?
None that I, you know, like I said, usually the patients who were expectant were definitely beyond, their injuries were such that they could not survive them. I had one experience, which was not uncommon for, I saw this happen to other people after I had been there for a long time. And I had one expectant patient come in. It was a young man. He came in off the field. He had a bandage on his head. You know, he came in, and he was he was on my side. You have to appreciate that we had like a 30-bed recovery room, surgical intensive care unit, and we really only had 3 nurses and 2 corpsmen to care for those patients. So it was, you know, it was very demanding. And this one patient came in, he was expected, and I just kind of decided that he was not going to die, that I was going to be able to save his life, and that they'd made a mistake. And I told the corpsman to get me the blood, because we used to just give blood because most of the patients who came in had such massive blood loss from their wounds before they got there. And we weren't supposed to do that. We weren't supposed to give blood to an expectant patient. And but I said, just, you know, give it to me. And then I started to change his dressing. And as I took the dressing off, you know, I mean, this is an awful story, but it's true. The whole back of his head was in my hands. And that was the nature of his injury. I mean, there was just no way that anybody could repair that. And I remember I would just stay there, and all the blood I'd been giving him came out, and I had to put it back and put a bandage around him. And I just really kind of became almost, I don't know, catatonic, I guess. And the corpsman went and got the nurse from the other side, and he came over. It was a male nurse. And he just took me away from there, took me away from the patient. And the corpsman cleaned up everything. And I went, I had a cigarette, washed my hands, and got back into focus, and went back to work.
I've read a lot about post-traumatic stress disorder. The first time I read about it was in, what was it? All Quiet on the Western Front, how the Germans in combat, how they dealt with it. And Paul, the main character, would say, you know, push it down. You know, someone gets killed, you don't, that's it. You don't talk about him. just push it down and you just keep going. And that's what you did.
Yeah, and but the thing is, I don't even think you realize it. I think it's very insidious. You don't realize that you are detaching emotionally from the situation, I think, until after you get home.
I know you published a book with other nurses called Visions of War.
We published this book. I co-edited this book with Linda Vandervante, who I served with in Vietnam at the 71st Evac Hospital, who wrote one of the first books by nurses in Vietnam, Home Before Morning. As a result of Linda's book, nurses started to reach out and talk to other nurses. Most of us had been alone with our thoughts and our feelings for years. So we're talking now 1980, 82. So we really had no one to share with, because over the 10-year period, there were only about 8,000 women who served in Vietnam. So there weren't a lot of us spread out over 10 years and throughout the country. So as we began to connect around the Vietnam Memorial and the Vietnam Women's Memorial, I had been writing this poetry over the years, and I kept it in a little brown folder. I would never share it with anybody, because I felt if people knew what I was really feeling, they wouldn't understand it, and they would think there was something wrong with me. And
I want you to read some poem. I read the book, and I think I called you and told you that I loved it, but it made me cry. It made me cry.
Yeah.
Go ahead, read whatever you want to read.
Well, I talked about that expected soldier, and he was one of my recollections that would come back to me when I came home. And I wrote this poem in 1970, which was just after I came home, and I entitled it Recollection. And it's about him. And it says, I'll read it. I close my eyes and conjure up visions of things past, unwillingly, unknowingly, like the blinking of an eye, the twitch of a muscle. Visions of men, young and old, so many young and also old. The gift of life slowly drips from its container to form a puddle on the floor beneath your head. Pump, pump, pump. I try in vain to replace what is going and gone. Streaks of crimson in waves of gold on sea of green and shore so white, so very white. What purpose has brought you here? To lie so still, to think no thoughts, to cease to dream and care to be. The nature of your mission locked in your soul, the reason for your living in another's heart, the vision of your death in the folds of my mind. And that was a story about that young man.
The more we push down, the more will come up. And it comes up all the time.
It does come up. It does. Yeah, and you do learn. You have to get it out. You have to share it. And
we took a long time to learn that.
We did.
Believe me.
We did.
Oh boy, this was great. All right. This is
terrific. And I thank you,
I thank
my
you.
friend,
Finally.
for everything that you have done to make this story known.